In today's show, we're going to be talking about human performance, but it's going to be anchored with the rapid change of AI. It's shaping every industry at a staggering pace. But here's the real question that most organizations still aren't asking. Are the humans leading that transformation actually equipped to thrive under the pressure? This week on the Wind Cycle podcast, I reflect on a conversation with senior partners at Kirkland Ellis about leadership, performance, pressure, and why organizations that invest in human readiness alongside the technology changes are the ones that I believe are going to lead us into the next decade. If this resonates with you today or your organization, feel free to reach out to us, contact@windcycle.org. We can set up a complimentary needs assessment and see whether the Wind Cycle program is right for you and your team. Enjoy the show. I'm Matt Dixon, and welcome to the Purple Patch Podcast. The mission of Purple Patch is to empower and educate every human being to reach their athletic potential. Through the lens of athletic potential, you reach your human potential. The purpose of this podcast is to help time-starved people everywhere integrate sport into life. And welcome to the Purple Patch Podcast. As ever, your host Matt Dixon, and today, another special Wind Cycle edition. This week, I stood in front of one of the most accomplished rooms that really I've ever presented to. Senior partners at Kirkland Ellis, one of the premier law firms in the world, all gathered in Boca Raton for their share partners meeting. The conversation I had was absolutely nothing to do with law. Thank goodness, they say. It had everything to do with what it actually takes to lead at the highest level. Right now, in this moment, under this kind of pressure, I left that room thinking two things. First, I'm more convinced than ever that the framework that I brought into that room is urgently needed right now. And second, Kirkland Ellis asking me to even be there in the first place tells you something important about how they think. Because we are at an extraordinary inflection point for leaders and organizations. There is a change that's occurring rapidly under our feet. Everybody knows it. AI is reshaping every industry at a pace that is genuinely disorienting. The legal world, of course, is included in that. But here's where I think a lot of organizations are missing. And what I believe Kirkland Ellis had the wisdom to see clearly. The AI conversation is essential, but it's not enough, not in a vacuum, because the humans navigating the transformation, the leaders that are making the calls, guiding the teams, absorbing the pressure, they need investment too, and I would argue perhaps more than ever. Today, I want to reflect on my conversation with Kirkland, what I shared, why I think it resonated, and what I believe it means for any leader or organization who's paying attention. I'm not going to turn this into a how-to episode. What I want you to walk away with is a few things that are genuinely worth thinking about yourself, your team, and how your organization is equipped to approach the demands ahead of you. It's all going to be in today's Wind Cycle episode. AI, the added pressures it brings, and the human-first approach to performance leadership, which I believe sets the path to great success in the future. It is in today's Meat and Potatoes. Yes, folks, the meat and potatoes, we're talking about AI, change, and the performance pressure that all leaders and business professionals face. Let me describe what I observe leaders are actually carrying right now, because it's considerable. I think that we've normalized something that deserves to be named. You see, if you're in a position of leadership, leading any type of team in any organization, you likely already have pretty considerable demands. There's a lot of tangible deliverables that you have to face. You're leading teams. None of that is easy. You have to navigate pressure. Quite often, it's all built with plenty of travel facing as well. None of these demands on the day-to-day life have been reduced. Client expectations, competitive pressure, team complexity, none of this is softened. But suddenly, over the last couple of years, accelerating at an absolutely crazy rate is, of course, the AI transformation imperative. We must now, every organization, integrate it. We must understand it. We need to communicate about it. We need to make strategic decisions. And it's not something that you can predict or see into the future too well. And yet, every single leader is faced with the added pressure of all of these demands. This isn't a substitution of a demand, it is quite clearly an addition to an already quite often overloaded system. And the people that are absorbing the load, it's the leaders at the very center of it. And they're doing so on a level of sometimes creeping fatigue that's become so normalized that we've just stopped questioning it. It's just an addition you just have to navigate through. But this isn't a phase we're going through. This is the new role. And what I see quite often, understandably by the way, is a reactive state of many organizations. The big question that we are all as leaders being faced to ask is, how do we integrate AI effectively? And some are ahead of others, but that question is still there. We are living through the Wild West. It is huge transformation and change. And that is the right question. It's what every leader has to ask. But Kirkland asked a harder one alongside it, in partnership with it. And that's, who are the humans doing the integrating? And are we genuinely setting them up to thrive? And while that distinction sounds subtle, I believe it could be the difference between organizations that really thrive through this rather than just surviving. The ones that are actually going to lead the change. You can't build a high-performance future on a foundation of exhaustion, individually or collectively. And everything that I'd covered in my conversation with Kirkland was anchored around that. We can't thrive in the long time on a bedrock of exhaustion. Of course, the parallels of my own experience of a professional athlete, where I threw the more approach to it and ended up in chronic fatigue and underperformance. And when I paused and looked around and saw so many talented, committed athletes also navigating that journey of underperformance, and the transformation with the unlock, where we had a human-first approach to world-class sport, this is the parallel existence in business right now. This is the intersection of world-class sport and top business performance. I want you to ask yourself something, and I want you to genuinely sit with this. Are you or your organization investing in the people as deliberately as you are investing in technology right now? I'm not talking about wellness programs or perks. Quite frankly, I don't care if you have a ping pong table in the office. I'm talking about genuine strategic investment in the human beings at the center of your operation. For most organizations, if they're being honest, the answer is probably no. And there's a gap there. But I believe that gap is going to become very, very visible very quickly. We know that burnout is a huge challenge across teams more broadly. And in fact, that burnout is being channeled up to now leadership as well. In the last few summits that I've attended as a speaker, there have only been two topics of conversation. Number one, AI. That's natural. The second is exhaustion, burnout, and challenge. And these are for our top business leaders. I've spent 2 decades in the world of elite sport, coaching professional triathletes, Ironman champions, Olympians. And for the past several years, I've been bringing those lessons into the world of executive and the leadership space through Purple Patch and our Win Cycle program. And this is the framework that I brought to Kirkland. The reason that the athletic lens works, and I want to be precise about this, isn't because leadership is like sport. It's because the demands and pressures are so structurally similar. It's something that I learned very early on in my coaching career, with a unique background in which I was working with professional athletes, but in parallel was working with top business leaders. And an early coaching epiphany was quite simply, performance is performance. It doesn't matter the arena. And top business performance is so similar in pressure and demands to what it takes to be successful in world-class endurance sport. It's uncanny. But interestingly, the solutions are equally similar. Both require sustained high performance over a long season. They involve high-stakes decisions that have to be made under enormous pressure. They require the ability to lead through adversity while managing your own state at the same time. And in both worlds, the difference between good and great is so rarely talent, physical gifts, or the smartest in the room. It's actually about systems and preparation. You see, elite athletes don't show up to race day hoping they feel good. They've engineered readiness. I call it performance predictability, something that we always taught and sought for with the Purple Patch Pro Squad. The physical preparation, the mental game, the recovery, the nutrition, all of it being deliberate, everything planned, so that by the time race day arrives, peak performance isn't the goal. It's almost an outcome of a process that's already been completed. And that's the model. And I believe genuinely that leaders who adopt this model over the next decade are the ones that are going to start to pull away from the field. It's why we love to encourage leadership to view their roles similar to the way that a professional athlete would view their sport. As I said to the Kirkland senior partners, you want to prepare, you want to think, and you want to act like a pro, so you show up at a pro in your job. You can bring your best daily with energy and cognitive function. You can make better decisions under pressure. You can ensure you're focused on the right things, and you can lead your teams effectively towards ultimately a high-performance culture. So what can I share about my session with KNE? Well, the first was the physical foundation. This is the first dimension that I brought to the Kirkland team. It's what I call the performance base layer. Now, I'm not going to walk through every element of it today. It's a longer conversation. But the essential idea is this, and that's that the daily physical practices that most leaders tend to treat as personal luxuries, such as your movement, your deliberate recovery, your sleep, your nutrition, even your hydration. They're actually not separate from your professional performance. They are the foundation of which that performance sits on. And the research of this is unambiguous. The cognitive function, the emotional regulation, the capacity to make decisions under pressure, it's all directly impact with how leaders are treating their body. And that's just a simple biological fact, because your brain, by the way, is connected to your body. It is a biological organ that is directly impacted by the practices that go into feeding your energy, your cognitive function, and your capacity. And most leaders, if they're really honest, if they reflect, are not really treating their bodies like the performance instruments that they are. And so the only question I left the K&E partners with, and the question I want to leave you, is a very simple one. Are you approaching your physical readiness as a professional priority or a personal afterthought? It's a critical shift of mindset. These are ingredients, inputs into your performance operating system. And this is key. Now, the physical foundation, it is the kickstarter, the foundation, the catalyst, but it's only half the picture. What separates truly elite performers, whether we're talking about sport or in leadership, isn't how they prepare their bodies, but it's what happens to their mind when the pressure peaks. And this is where the most important and perhaps underinvested opportunity in leadership development really lives. Let me give you a picture here. Imagine an Ironman race, one of the biggest physical challenges there is in sports. Swim 2.5 miles, very quick transition, ride 112 miles, quite often through variable hilly terrain with lots of wind and quite often heat, and all capped off with a very glorious, often heat-soaked 26.2-mile marathon. Imagine that you're at mile 23 of that race. You might be 8-9 hours into racing. I tell you what's happening, your body is in full physiological revolt. And the great champions, the one that thrive, they're the ones that I've had much privilege to work with that aren't just surviving in that moment, but they're actually thinking during it. They're making decisions. They're retaining a sense of calm. They're executing their strategy. And so, in other words, under physiological and environmental conditions that are specifically engineered to destroy their capacity, they're actually doing exactly that. And that's not a gift. That's not about someone's physiological traits and genetic gifts. It's a trained capacity. And there is a mindset shift that I see in every elite performer that I've worked with. Let's talk about pressure. Elite performers don't experience pressure as a threat, as something harmful. They actually experience it as a signal that they're in the right arena, evidence that something important is happening, that they value. It's confirmation that their preparation is about to matter. We always like to say, pressure is a privilege. It means that you're in a moment that counts. And that reframe and the mental tools that help you navigate the periods of peak stress are every bit as trainable as cardiovascular fitness. I want to pause there. Your brain is trainable just like a muscle. We can reframe it cognitively and it shifts the ability to keep the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that's responsible for executive function, focus, decision-making, to keep it online. And with repeated exposure to high-stakes situations, we can actually mechanically train and shift the brain to become even better equipped to perform under pressure. There is no leadership program out there that treats and views the mindset in this way. And this is key. The brain is trainable. The key thing is that it doesn't know the context. What we love to do with leaders is get them out of their comfort zone. Sure, it's happening in the professional context, but do you know the arena where we see the brain training occur in the most exponential and deep-rooted manner possible? It's when we take a performance-driven leader that is full of life demands and we add a physical challenge. Something where repeatedly they get uncomfortable, goal-driven. They're taking on a challenge. It's part of the reason that so many leaders love to go and climb Kilimanjaro or compete in marathons or even Ironman races. It's because not just that their training provides a framework that drives effectiveness, not just that it's really good for their health, but also because it's giving them an edge in leadership. And here's the crazy thing. All of the traits of high performance that make up a champion mindset, they're not genetic. They're transferable and trainable. We can hone them. We can develop them. They're in all of us. And so by going on a journey with a physical challenge, you're training the brain, but it transfers into anything in life. Now, it's easy to understand the performance pressure when you're at mile 23 of a 26.2 marathon that's already had a big swim and a big bike going before it. But let's make it a little real here. Let's think about a Kirkland partner. They're not running a marathon. Why do they care? They are navigating a negotiation. They are trying to fuel readiness as they deliver a deadline on a project before a critical deadline. And there is moments in there where they look, the whole room looks to them for direction. The path isn't clear. And this sustained, unrelenting pressure at performing at the highest level as a Kirkland lawyer repeats day after day with no finish line in sight. It's exactly the same And here's the interesting thing. Our body and our brains respond physiologically exactly the same to these two high-stakes situations. There is no physiological response difference. And that's really important. And so just like our pro athlete at mile 23 of a marathon, a Kirkland lawyer needs to perform best in these moments. And the leaders that perform best in these moments aren't the ones that are just the smartest or have the most experience or even the ones that went to the best school. It's those that have designed a mental architecture to access their best thinking precisely when conditions are designed to prevent it. This is what we call the champion mindset, and this is what we explored with K&E. And so here's what I want you to consider with this. When pressure spikes in your professional life, when the stakes are really, really high, and perhaps clarity at its lowest, are you performing at your ceiling cognitively? Or are you performing at whatever level your stress response permits? Because those two things are incredibly different. Folks, as we take a break here, think about this. The best athletes in the world don't hope that they perform under pressure. They prepare for it. This isn't about wellness for you as a leader. It's about building capacity to sustain high performance. And so if you want you and your team to thrive and get repeatable wins on repeat, feel free to reach out to us at contact@wincycle.org. We can set up a complimentary needs assessment and see whether our programming is right for you. All right, enjoy the rest of the show. So these first two dimensions that we discussed, your performance baseline, physical readiness, your champion mindset, the mental game, borrowing from the tools and the way that an elite athlete thinks to bring performance readiness to day-to-day life, they come together. These are the first two dimensions that we brought around the individual leader. But there's one more, the thing that takes it all to the next level, and that's team. This is where, in many ways, the most significant opportunity lives. Because individual readiness, no matter how excellent, has a ceiling if it's not matched by the quality of leadership that any team receives. I would argue that many organizations have done a great job of developing managers. That's the common mindset. In fact, that's even the title. Managers, people that oversee the work, that drive accountability, that execute against a plan. But where I see a lot of gaps in working with teams is an underinvestment in developing coaches. And I want to be specific about what I mean here, because I think the word is used loosely. A manager's orientation tends to be more towards the work, execution. A coach's orientation is more towards the person doing the work. And so rather than oversight, execution, accountability, a coach thinks more in terms of development, of growth, of unlocking potential. And so in other words, a manager might ask, is this getting done? The other asks, are we growing? Do you believe in the mission? Are they being set up to perform to their ceiling and maybe even raise the ceiling? Both really matter. Let's make no bones about it. But in a period of sustained disruption, where we're at right now, huge change, management without coaching is not enough to keep people engaged, performing, challenged, but also supported. How people thrive. And so I shared with Kirkland with our time in Boca Raton that I think the most simple and powerful definition of what a coach does is critical. And that's to help people get the most out of themselves. That's it. And isn't that in many ways the job description of a great leader? I believe it is. And if that's the case, and then the implications of how we develop, evaluate, and invest in leadership are pretty grand. You see, in any arena, disruption is the precise moment where teams either hold together or they fracture. And what determines which way it goes is almost always the quality, in my belief, of the coaching culture that sits beneath the team and organization. Do people feel seen? Are they aligned on what success looks like? Do they have clarity on what their role is and how it imprints that success? Do they actually feel and have trust in the person leading them? And do they believe that that person cares about them and is invested in their growth, not just their output? Kirkland want their leaders to be able to answer yes to all of those questions. They brought me in to help build the framework to make it possible. And I think that's a great perspective. I think the organizations that develop this capacity now are going to be set up as they're more resilient. They're defining really what makes a high impact team. And so I think it's a question that's worth sitting with, genuinely. Don't just nod along, but actually listen. Do the people that you lead experience you as someone who is helping them get the most out of themselves? That's a coach. Not managing them, not just evaluating them, but genuinely coaching them. Because I think the answer to that question will tell you more about your leadership than any metrics on your performance review. I want to close today's discussion not with a list of actions, but with 3 things that I think it might be valuable just to reflect on. Because reflection isn't enough, but because the right reflection leads to ultimately the right action. The first is what I would label the human investment question. First, let's talk about you. Are you investing in your own daily readiness on a day-to-day basis, physically and emotionally? Not as afterthoughts, not as filling in the cracks if I've got time, but actually as your performance operating system. In parallel to that, are you doing it as a team? Is your organization investing in its humans as deliberately as it is its technology? Now, I'm not asking if you have some wellness perks. I'm asking whether it's a genuine strategic resource commitment to the development of human beings. Because I think that is a key catalyst to helping building resilient teams for the future. The second is when pressure peaks, and by the way, it always peaks, the stakes are highest. Are you performing at your ceiling? Or is there a gap between your capability and your performance under stress? Because if that gap isn't fixed, and it can be fixed, it's trainable, you need to first understand it, and you need to work towards it. And finally, if you're listening as a leader, the people that you lead, do they feel developed? Do they feel set up to win? Do they know you care, that you're invested? And are you raising the standards that are necessary for them to thrive, but also giving them systematic support to be successful? You don't need a survey to answer this, by the way. All you need is 1 or 2 honest conversations. I'd recommend sit with someone on your team that you're responsible for leading and ask them for feedback and listen. What do they actually say? Because it might be a catalyst for inspiration. I'm genuinely grateful for the work that I did with Kirkland, and also, to be honest, the trust that they place in me. But what they did down there in Florida, choosing to actually invest in their people as human beings, not just as professionals, that's not a soft decision. But I do think it's a really smart one. Thanks for being here today. If the conversation resonated, share it with maybe one leader in your world who needs to hear it or might find it at least interesting. That's how ideas travel. We'll see you next week. Take care. If today's conversation resonated, don't let it stay theoretical. At WinCycle, we work with leaders and organizations to build systems, habits, mindset, and coaching culture required to sustain high performance under the real-world pressures that we all face. From keynotes, workshops, to leadership development and team performance programs, our work is designed to help people prepare, think, and perform at their best, individually and collectively. If you'd like to explore bringing WinCycle into your organization, just feel free to reach out for a pressure-free conversation. contact@wincycle.org. Thanks for being here, and see you next week. Guys, thanks so much for joining, and thank you for listening. I hope that you enjoyed the new format. You can never miss an episode by simply subscribing. Head to the Purple Patch channel of YouTube and you will find it there and you could subscribe. Of course, I'd like to ask you, if you will subscribe, also share it with your friends, and it's really helpful if you leave a nice positive review in the comments. Now, any questions that you have, let me know. Feel free to add a comment and I will try my best to respond and support you on your performance journey. And in fact, as we commence this video podcast experience, if you have any feedback at all, as mentioned earlier in the show, we would love your help in helping us to improve. Simply email us at info@purplepatchfitness.com or leave it in the comments of the show at the Purple Patch page and we will get you dialed in. We'd love constructive feedback. We are in a growth mindset, as we like to call it. And so feel free to share with your friends. But as I said, let's build this together. Let's make it something special. It's really fun. We're really trying hard to make it a special experience. And we want to welcome you into the Purple Patch community. With that, I hope you have a great week. Stay healthy, have fun, keep smiling, doing whatever you do. Take care.